Across America's ambassador, I hope to help the National Education Association spark a true love of reading among readers for all ages and foster community around diverse books. When people talk about books together, their understanding of each other grows so much. That's why I'm excited to make a reading connection today and talk with Ali Stroker and Stacy Davidowitz, author of The Chance to Fly, a featured title for NEA's year-round celebration of Read Across America. Thank you guys for being here.
Thanks, Marley.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you guys and to talk about this new story for middle grade books and kids of one of my favorite age, I think the golden age of reading, which is when you first get your step into independence as a young reader. So can you guys share what The Chance to Fly is about briefly and kind of the significance behind the title?
Of course. Stacy, you want to start and then I'll add.
Sure, I'll do the super abbreviated version of what this story is about. But basically, the book follows our protagonist. Her name is Nat Beacon, and she has just moved across the country from San Francisco to New Jersey, and she is about to start wheelchair racing, but her true love is musical theater. And at the first practice, she stumbles upon a flyer for an audition notice for a tweed production of Wicked, and that just changes the trajectory of her life. Yeah.
And I will piggyback on what Stacy said. This story is about overcoming what you think your own limitations might be and how much more powerful you are with a group of friends and people that support you. I wanted our character Nat to be a young girl in a wheelchair because I am in a wheelchair, and growing up, I didn't have any content that I felt like I could really relate to. And when I was in middle school, I was so badly looking for narratives that I could identify with and that could give me hope and encouragement that I was going to be okay.
Representation is extremely powerful, and I think alongside this story, we talk, and you guys talk so much, not we, I'm not an author, but talk so much about bravery and the importance of bravery. So for Ali, both as an actress and a performer throughout your life growing up and even into your professional career, how much has bravery been a part of your success and sometimes your harder and more difficult moments?
I definitely identify with the concept of being brave and finding my own bravery. One of the things about being in a wheelchair and wanting to pursue theater was that I didn't see anyone else around me in the theater industry who had a disability or was in a wheelchair. And so to be kind of on my own and the first person to do things a little bit differently as far as mobility goes, I had to find confidence within myself, which is kind of how I would maybe define bravery. And I had to believe in myself and go after my dreams no matter what obstacles, no matter what people told me. I had to find it within myself because I didn't see it around me. So bravery has been a theme of my life and is certainly a theme of Nat's life too.
And I think it's so clear that it's important for young kids of all experiences to understand the importance of being brave, of taking those first step moments. And a lot of this book has those moments in small and larger ways. So when writing, Ali, what moments did you feel were very close to what other kids in wheelchairs might experience and might feel? But what moments do you think are also universal to people of all different abilities that, see and feel that same way, that same anxiousness, that same excitement? And how do you kind of make sure there's a balance between the two?
One of the scenes that I think it's actually kind of one of Stacy and my favorite scenes, but when Nat is she's at her first rehearsal for Wicked, and she is cast and in a part where there is choreography. And so all of the characters are learning the dance for the first time. And the director tells Nat that she can go home. She doesn't have to worry about doing and learning the choreography. And something that I think happens often for young people with disabilities is that adults around them try to keep them safe by letting them know that they are off the hook in certain situations where the adult doesn't see that there's possibilities. However, for young people with disabilities, for all people with disabilities, creativity is like the first thing that I grab for when I am faced with a problem. And Nat uses her creativity to solve this problem, and she asks for help. And that I think is such a specific thing for people with disabilities that other people might put limitations on them before they even get the chance to try for themselves. And the other theme that I think is specific to not just people living with disabilities, but for anybody who feels different, any young person who maybe doesn't necessarily fit in, the element of exclusion, of not being included. And this comes out kind of a few times when they are at their retreat camping. And Nat kind of feels like all of this fear about, like, is she going to be able to keep up? Are the kids going to include her in things? I don't know about you guys, but like that was one of my greatest fears growing up, about just like not being able to keep up with the group and feeling like maybe I was going to be left behind, or that the group wasn't going to be patient and wait for me in the way that I was moving a little slowly and I was moving differently. And so I was always so afraid that I wasn't going to be able to keep up.
Yeah, those moments happen for all of us. And I think there's a great kind of conversation within the book about the navigation of one's body and self-confidence that we can both relate to, and then also see a new perspective on that. Whereas somebody that has still felt with those same issues of being a new kid, I now understand a different perspective to that same kind of feeling and those same fears. And you guys have done a great job, I think, in the collaborative process where it's such a like a smooth flowing book where you know that it's two people that are writing together, they're collaborating, but you guys didn't talk about how you guys met. I don't know how you two met each other. I can tell you both love theater, you both love music. There's a lot of fun and exciting energy within the book that you both seem to share. But how did you two meet each other?
So I was approaching a project with a main character who uses a wheelchair for mobility. And I wanted to talk to Ali. I was, someone, I had seen her in Spring Awakening, and she's incredible. And we have a mutual friend. So I took advantage of that and was like, wondering if she would meet me for lunch. So we met for lunch and we got to talking, and we really hit it off. Like, we very much, like, our energies were very much in sync. And Ali kind of was like, well, why don't we like write a book like together? And I was like, wait, that's an option? Like, wow. And it was immediate. Like, we immediately started brainstorming, outlining, and we wrote this book, like the first draft of it, in well under a year. And so so we that's how we met and how we started to collaborate.
Oh, that's super cool. I love that kind of experience that you guys just started off, knowing each other kind of here and there, and it's grown into a wonderful partnership. And I also know that one of the biggest touches, I would say, from Stacy's style of writing is using camp as an environment for kids. You have other titles that feature, I know this is kind of your signature touch now. We keep going. I'm gonna always spot it out. And I think it's a really interesting space for a middle grade book where it's an environment full of kids, and those same kind of experiences are heightened because there's not as much supervision, and I think you can see more of what kids are like. So what do you think about a camp lends itself to a more powerful and exciting story?
I think honestly, everything you just said, it's true. It's the autonomy of and the friendships. When kids are with their friends, they are themselves and they can be who they are. And that's not to say that kids aren't who they are at home, but there's just this energy where they're sort of discovering who they are and what they love to do and their passions. So I also think that summer is like a season of possibility and change and happiness. And I think that it lends itself to a time and setting where characters can thrive and come into themselves in new
Yeah,
ways. Yeah.
I think it's the best. I never got a sleepaway camp experience. I've grown out of that time, but I will always love watching watching movies and reading books that have the camp experience, because I think it helps catch the true essence of what being a kid is like. And kind of swinging back to Ali, there are a lot of moments in here that I think are just so beautiful and vulnerable for you to discuss. So when you go back to your childhood, how difficult or easy can it be to think about the times that you were nervous and didn't feel like you were going to be included, the times where you were self-conscious about who you were? So how do you try to reflect, or how did you try to reflect without, making it a sad or frustrating experience?
It's so funny because when we were working on the book, I would share stories with Stacy, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I haven't thought about this in like 20 years. I can't believe that I'm remembering it." And what was so crazy was when I was sharing these stories with Stacy, it was like the emotions were right there. And I think that's one of the things that I love about Nat's story is that she's experiencing a lot of firsts. Like, for example, when she like falls for Malik and then they like have this romance. For me, like, I remember having my first crush while doing a show. And to talk about those things and to share the nerves, like those first kind of butterflies that you get when you have a crush on somebody, or like for an audition. I remember my first audition in New York City, and like I wanted to throw up. I was so nervous. And when I was sharing all of this with Stacy, and what was so fun about writing together was that it was really important to me that Nat was not just me. There was also Nat was also Stacy. And so we could combine our stories together, but in order to collaborate and do that, we had to share with each other. And I think that's part of how Stacy and I got so close, and we had so much trust with each other during the writing process, because we were sharing these really, really vulnerable parts of our life, and stories that actually I think formed who we are today. Like those years like of being 12 and 13 years old are so impactful on the rest of your life and how you view yourself. And so that was one of my favorite parts of the collaboration, being able to share those really, really almost like secrets that you don't really go back to that often as an adult, and sharing them with Stacy and figuring out how we were going to incorporate them into the book.
I think they're incorporated very well, and it's cool to have writing a book as a duo is a unique and what seems to be like a super fun process. I think you guys are going to have a lot of kids that want to write books with their best friends now. So how do you think you can explain to young kids how collaborative writing works? Because we know that you can't have both hands on a keyboard. So is it similar to theater? Is it similar to creative arts? How does that process go for you, and how did you kind of make it work for what you wanted to do?
Sure, yeah. Well, I think that approaching collaboration really depends. I think it changes for who you are and because every writer approaches writing books differently too. So when you're collaborating on anything, it's really like checking in with that person and figuring out with Ali and we really had we didn't really talk so much about like, okay, what exactly are we going to do? It was a pretty easy flow, which I'm so thankful for, because that doesn't always happen. Sometimes it's a lot of stop start, really figuring out how to make something like this work, especially because we're following one protagonist, not two different people where we're alternating chapters and we're each taking like a voice. So somehow, because we were so in sync, we were able to very quickly find a voice for Nat that, like as Ali said, really blended our two voices together in a sense. And as far as the outlining, we got together, and this was like pre-COVID, so we were able to get together in person, and we like just kind of threw down ideas. And like Ali, you were talking about with like different experiences and memories, and we knew that we wanted some certain events, and we threw down an outline chapter by chapter what would happen pretty quickly. And then we kind of just decided, all right, where would your strengths be in, like, which scenes should you be writing? You know, which ones feel super close to you that like I'm not sure what that exact experience of being in a wheelchair in this moment is. Like, can you approach it first? And then we would edit each other's work, give feedback to each other constantly, so that we felt like it was just like a unified voice, and that everything flowed.
I like
I
how
want to
excited you
piggyback.
are just talking. You're so excited just talking about it. I think it's such just like a sweet partnership that you guys have. And Ali, continue.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback because the reality was I had never written a book. I'm an actress, but I have a skill set in creating a character because that's my job as an actor. So, what I was able to bring to the process, I think, was unique to what I do like full time. And Stacy has such experience with writing middle grade that what I loved about the collaboration was that there wasn't much like, no, I want to do that. No, I want to do that. It was more like, I trust that you do what you do super well. And then Stacy really trusted me with bringing this personal experience and like developing this character because it's what I do in my life. So, for anybody watching this, if you're somebody who wants to try to do something that you've never done before, I recommend trying to find somebody who is really good at that and then collaborating together because you're going to learn from that other person. And because you're coming in as a beginner, they're going to learn from you because I didn't have any assumptions about how this process worked. I was brand new to it. So it was just this amazing team. I think that we make an amazing team as far as creating a story based on our own strengths.
You guys being excited about it, I think will make all these other kids that are watching even more excited about the idea of collaboration, which is a super important part of both this writing process and of the themes of the book. They're working in a team. Theater is a collaborative effort. And you guys mentioned something that's really interesting that I know about because I have friends who really like theater. It's miscasting. And you talk about some of these theater like lingo and phrases and terms. So how did you guys try to make those kinds of experiences or this process of creating a show accessible and understandable to kids that might have never heard of this before? They don't know Wicked, they don't know, all these other shows. So how did you guys try to make it also a love letter to theater kids that enjoy this so much, but also something that every everyday kid that's never seen a show before can understand?
I think that because Stacy and I are such theater kids at heart, we knew that that was going to come through. And we needed to make sure that these themes were sort of universal so that anybody reading it, and I always say, like, this book is for any kid who's ever felt different, like they don't fit in. Because Nat's specific experiences, some of them are based on being in a chair, but some of them are just based on being a preteen girl and like what it feels like. So, yeah, I mean, that's sort of my kind of my piece. Stacy, did you want to like add to that?
Well, I think that um, I think that there's I think that specificity in a book, the more sometimes the more specific that you can be, it really helps us understand, even if we're not necessarily in that world. Like if someone reading this book is not into theater, but they are reading about Nat and her passions toward theater. I mean, I think that you connect to the themes and feelings and emotions and drive of the character most of all. But we decided we made it so that we didn't get so deep. I mean, we definitely dove into theater references, but we had to scale back at some point too. Like I mean, I think there's puns and things that probably got lost because we wanted to make it a little bit more broad, like broader and more universal for readers. But I do think that the idea, going back to the idea of miscast, is that like this, and this is also a universal theme, is that like, you know, kids should feel like they can be anything, and that there are no that limitations that society places or has in their heads, especially adults, like those can be broken. And so the idea that like a lot of times Nat is struggling like with which roles she can play in a production of Wicked, or will she be able to be in a show, or could she ever be on Broadway? And you know, Ali herself is such a groundbreaker that like we were trying to take these cues from her own life and kind of set up this theme that, you know, if you have a dream, if you have passion, if you have hard work, if you're surrounded by people that support you and love you, and you love them and support them, then like you can make things happen for yourself. And that theme I feel like is universal. I mean, I'm not a big like football person, but I've seen countless of like inspirational football movies and have cried, right? Like it's that kind of thing.
I think you do capture that. That's a good example of it as well. That sports, I think sports and theater can do the same kind of thing, where there's a very specific understanding of what a goal is or what an aspiration is, but at the end of the day, you can tell how much it matters to people. And one of the things that I think is one of my favorite parts of a character like Nat is that she comes off from the beginning feeling confident in herself in some ways, not in every way, but she knows what she needs to do to feel comfortable in her body, to navigate her own world, and to love who she is. And obviously there are twists and turns with moving and new groups and new friends, but Ali, in your life, how have you managed, you know, going back and forth between being a leader and saying, hey, I know how I can navigate my own world. I know my tools, I know what I have, but also having to ask for help and have vulnerable moments where it's always a little bit harder than you thought. And I think Nat struggles with that a little bit, as most teenagers do or tweens do. So how have you tried to go back and forth between a leadership role and also having moments where you might feel less than confident in how you feel?
It's taken so much practice. I think that's the only way that you get good at being empowered and a leader in situations like that is just practice. And, you know, I just turned 34 and I still struggle with sometimes feeling like that was a situation and I needed help and I received the help, but I didn't really feel empowered in that situation because I didn't really speak up in the way that I wished I had because I was afraid. I was afraid that maybe I might seem bossy or I might seem like I wasn't grateful. But the truth is, my life, part of being me, part of being Ali, is just that I need help. And I can look at that as a limitation or I can look at that as an opportunity. And I choose to look at it as an opportunity because I feel like when I get to connect with people and I am making myself vulnerable by asking for help, then I am able to make a connection with somebody else and show my humanity, which then often allows other people to do the same. And it makes my life really rich. And, you know, when I was a teenager, I was definitely not as skilled at that. And that's why I really wanted to include that in the book, because I think that so many young people struggle with the balance of needing help. And you can be somebody who needs support and still feel empowered. And I think that that is sort of the balance. So it's something that I practice still, like in my life, Marley, all the time. Like I'm thinking about how am I able to stay empowered and also need to receive from somebody else? And you know, all those fears come in of am I too much? Am I a burden? But I know that like this is just who I am and I get to own that and I get to love this life that I've been given.
I just think that's such a wonderful message. I think particularly from a young girl's perspective, that many girls struggle with the idea that independence is also very important, but you don't want to seem like you're the girl that always needs help, but you don't want to be super bossy. And I've always been called the word bossy, and I do not enjoy that at all. And I think Nat can really take from her friend group, the Broadway Bounders, to show what it looks like to ask for help, to need help and to have people that respect those boundaries, that want you to feel confident in your skin while also doing what they need to do to be a supportive friend. So how do you think that everyday kids can help people who are disabled or in wheelchairs or use wheelchairs for mobility to be supportive, but also not to push or to be and disrespectful in any way?
Well, Stacy, I'll lead off on this, and then I would love for you to also chime in. But I think the first part of it is being brave enough to ask. And sometimes talking about disability or asking somebody about their experience is really scary. And it feels like, is this rude? But I can't tell you when I was growing up how relieved I was when people would ask me really good questions. Like, what is it like? Like, what is it like to be in your skin? What is it like to move the way you do? These are things that I was dying to express, but the truth was I didn't always feel comfortable. So for anyone who wants to be helpful and a good friend, also realize that not every challenge in somebody's life who has a disability has to do with their disability. They're just like you in that they want to feel included. They want to feel like they have a group of friends, that they have people that have their back. They want to feel seen. They want to feel understood. So sometimes leading off with not just asking about their disability, but asking about them, who the person is, I think is the strongest and most helpful thing, is to communicate, ask good questions, and get interested in the person. And then you will understand their relationship to their disability. Every single person has a different relationship to it. And that's what makes us all unique and all really different.
Stacey, did you have anything you wanted to add? I know it's not clearly not your experience, but how do you think you've learned through this process ways to be more respectful, to be more kind, and to be more understanding of all the people that you come and interact with in everyday life?
I mean, I've learned so much from Ali, and like everything that Ali is describing, even just like the being brave to ask, like, especially when we first got started. I mean, it's to write a book of, where the protagonist uses a wheelchair for mobility, and that is not my experience, is really intimidating. And I think that like Ali is such a generous, warm person, and we were able to open up so much to each other. And so I learned so much, and I continue to, every time that we get together, every single time that we do an interview together, I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. Like, I'm always learning new things, and it helps so much for our friendship relationship, but also for the character. When we were writing that, like, so much of what Ali was talking about with the experience of her friends getting to know her for her, I mean, they really bond and connect with Nat and who she is. And then it isn't until they're at this retreat where the question of some of her, like the origins of like how did you get to use a wheelchair? Like, that's a question that no one had asked up until this point, weeks into their friendship. And weeks feels like years when you're in a camp working so intimately together on a production or in an environment like that. So I think that everything that Ali mentioned was very much represented in our character.
Now, I have a tricky question for Ali that I think is important and difficult for a lot of young kids to understand. So when I talk about diversity and inclusion, a lot of the times people want me to use the phrase where you're talking about books regardless of race, which I actually disagree with, where I think we need to consider differences and value them. So how do you guys in the book try to navigate the idea that it's not necessarily seeing past a wheelchair, it's respecting that? And I think sometimes people try to disregard these differences and say that they don't matter, but in truth, I think they make relationships stronger. So how do I think that's a tricky way to approach it for kids, where you want them to actually consider these differences and value them versus saying, it doesn't matter at all. We don't care about this. We don't see that. But telling them that we see it and we actually care about it and love it and respect it.
I think it comes around it really is about ownership. And I think when writing these narratives and the way that we write middle grade now in 2021, we must take ownership over the differences. I couldn't agree with you more, Marley. Like, I think that people being like, oh, I don't even notice your wheelchair can sort of feel like, I don't believe you. Like, I don't believe it. I actually don't believe you. And and I think that it sort of also feels like a shortcut. It's like I want you to feel like I accept you. So I'm going to say that I don't see and it doesn't like nothing about your difference bothers me, which
Yes,
I
I
think is
completely
such a
agree.
catch, right? It's like a catch 22 because it's like, no, 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 no. This is beyond like, of course it doesn't bother you. This is about understanding me and seeing me for all of who I am, the fact that I have a disability and that I am a girl and that I am an actress and that I have been through really hard things and that I have um, I am normal, but I'm also so uniquely me. And I think so when I talk about ownership and when Stacy and I were writing these specific parts of Nat's experience, I didn't want to skip over what it feels like in the discomfort of introducing your difference to a group. And what I mean by that is that every single person that I meet relates to my disability differently. And I am the leader and I take ownership over how I want to share it. And I think that that's something that I want to empower all young people with any differences to do, that you get to own your difference no matter what it is, and you get to have your own relationship to it no matter what it is. And my thing is learn how to articulate it. Learn how to share your story and what you want people to know about you. And then they will respect that. But if you allow other people to make assumptions or you allow other people to even just want to breeze and brush over it, it will come up again. And it will be in a way that I've always found to be like not exactly like it doesn't feel right or it doesn't something about it doesn't sit right with me because it wasn't addressed. So I sort of have gone off a bit on a tangent, but I hope it makes sense that my biggest thing is about ownership and articulation and sharing and disclosing who you are and what your differences mean to you.
I think
I
that's
just want
probably the most like powerful thing you can really say to articulate that, because I think the idea of difference for me comes from a most like a racial perspective, but it can also come from so many other different perspectives. And I think it's so important and valuable to me to hear somebody who is not of the same ethnicity of me, who sees diversity in a different way, but also understands the point that we need to recognize the difference rather than erase it. So I think like when you were saying, when people say, oh, I don't notice your wheelchair, it's almost like you're treating it like a pimple. It's like it's not the same kind of thing where you say, oh, I didn't notice your pimple, your skin looks great, but it's not that puts a negative connotation on a difference. And I really like how this book does everything in its power and is very successful in making sure that there is no negative connotation towards the differences, even with the other kids a part of Nat's friend group. So it's every single kid that has a difference and recognizing them and valuing them in very particular and personal ways. So, Stacy, if you want to talk about how you try to honor experiences that are not yours, not just through Nat, but through the other Broadway bounders and other kids in the camp, how do you guys do that? And how enjoyable is that for you to feel like you're doing something right that shows diversity for the main character's experience, but being experience and environment itself?
Sure. We really like well, my brain is like going because I have so many things I want to respond to. The first is that one, what Ali just said, you articulated that like so stunningly. And I think when you were speaking about ownership, the thing that came to mind that you kept mentioning to me as we were writing was Peaches, and how Nat's chair, you know, it's Nat's chair, right? So anytime there was like it was her, right? We had to because it, you know, Pete in the chair is also named Peaches, and like having Nat's chair named Peaches is like so integral into recognizing the importance and the love and positivity surrounding her wheelchair. And also we kind of wanted to have it be so that in theater, it's a lot of, you know, kids who feel different coming together. I feel like that is pretty standard, and that's what makes you know, ensembles and putting on a production so beautiful, because kids are coming from all different places in their lives with all different you know, with all differences that they are really proud of when they're working together and putting on a show as a group. So I think when we were like thinking about, you know, how can other kids feel different but feel special when they're doing their show, we were looking at, you know, like Hudson feeling like he doesn't always fit in with his brothers who are super sporty, and he's like this gay tap dancer. And, you know, we're looking at Ray, who feels like she's, you know, she's like she plays like hockey, and so she's kind of built strong, and she doesn't always feel like she's super comfortable in her body because she doesn't fit that like skinny girl, you know, ideal that society has placed on us. And so I think that like taking a look at these characters and their differences and what they might otherwise feel self-conscious about, but then having them kind of hash it out with each other. And Marley, you were talking about this, how that like because they're able to talk to each other, they're able to recognize you know, what makes them feel different, become proud of who they are, and they're able to support each other and also see other people and have these new perspectives. So I think that's what we were aiming for, and I was, you know, aiming for with these characters as well.
This conversation made me so happy because I think that there's so much that I've been able to both learn and my own feelings about diversity and these experiences that young kids have feel more valuable and validated through conversations like this. And I think there are so many young kids that will feel that way, that they may not use a wheelchair for mobility, but understand those universal messages and those same feelings. And I think the book, especially as a middle grade book, does a fantastic job at articulating that, supporting those ideas, and encouraging kids to maybe do theater if they want to, you know, participate in these kinds of activities and showing a really fun perspective to that. But I wanted to kind of end our conversation on a more serious note, talking about the importance of diverse readers and diversity. So NEA's Read Across America is about celebrating a nation of diverse readers, and we try our best, and we always try super hard to make sure that these stories show all different kinds of experiences. So how do you guys think The Chance to Fly fits into that celebration, fits into that, you know, puzzle piece that is our world, and especially what young readers are doing? So how did you guys try to send messages to young readers about the importance of diversity while sharing a very particular experience?
I think it started with the why we wanted to write this book. And the truth was, I needed to know that there was an authentic story about a young girl in a wheelchair in the world. And my experience is not everybody in a wheelchair's experience. Everyone has a different, you know, time with their disability. However, my story, like we were speaking about earlier, is really, really specific. And I had a dream that I believed in that had never been done before. And I wanted to share what happened at the beginning, the turning points of my narrative, and where these obstacles came in. And it's so funny because some of the parts of the book, Nat was able to handle the situations the way that I dreamed I would have been able to. And so those situations that Nat is able to use her voice, she's able to overcome, she's able to get creative. That's what I want for this next generation. Whether you use a wheelchair or not, that every young girl feels like they can speak up and get creative and solve their own problems. And so this book is authentic representation of diversity. and shows that if you have a dream, if you have a goal, if you surround yourself with the right people and you believe in yourself and you stay patient and you stay honest, that you can achieve those things, and you can have all of those things in your life. You don't have to live limited. And that's why, for me, not to be corny, but that's why it's called The Chance to Fly, because it's like anybody has the chance to do this. Anyone.
Mm-hmm. And it's a lyric from Wicked.
Yes, it's also a song lyric, which, is not a problem either.
I think that kind of summarizes it perfectly, though. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to do this with us today. I think there are so many kids that are going to feel more engaged, supported, and I think validated in their own identities and experiences. So if you guys have one last piece of advice you'd like to give to all our middle grade readers out there enjoying their summers, trying to keep up with reading, getting a little bit stressed about growing up, what quick advice would you have for them as we close out our final conversation?
I would say to surround yourself with people you love and who hold you up and believe in you, and to collaborate with those people. Work together and make magic.
Oh, I love that. And my piece of advice would be to follow your excitement. Whatever you wake up excited about, follow that. Pursue those things. The thing you can't stop talking about, the things you can't stop thinking about it. Talk to your friends about it. Talk to your teachers about it. Talk to your parents about it. And find ways to make your excitement and your dreams realities.
I think that can help me as a 16-year-old and all the people older and younger than me. Thank you guys so much once again. Make sure to check out The Chance to Fly. It is one of my new favorite middle grade books, and I've totally enjoyed this conversation. Thank you guys.
Thank you.